"It was the worst thing I've had to deal with in all my years." The words hung heavy in the air, thick with unspoken horrors. The seasoned police captain, his face etched with years of witnessing the darkest corners of humanity, shuddered as he spoke. He had seen his fair share of violence, cruelty, and despair, but the events that unfolded in the remote Mexican village of Yba Bua in 1963 still haunted his dreams. It was a tale of blind faith, chilling manipulation, and unimaginable tragedy. A story the internet, in its relentless hunger for sensationalism, had twisted and distorted. This is the true story of Yba Bua. Nestled deep in the heart of Mexico, shrouded by dense jungle and forgotten by time, lay the village of Yba Bua. Isolated and untouched by the outside world, its inhabitants lived a simple life. They were farmers, their days ruled by the rhythms of the sun and the seasons. They worshipped the old gods, their lives intertwined with the spirits of the land. Life in Yba Bua was harsh, but it was theirs. A close-knit community, bound by tradition and shared hardship, they knew nothing else. They were, for all intents and purposes, a people untouched by the complexities and corruptions of the modern world, until the day the outsiders arrived. 1961. The serenity of Yba Bua was shattered by the arrival of two charismatic strangers, Magdalene and Alizar Souls. The village, known for its peaceful and uneventful life, was suddenly abuzz with whispers and speculations. The twins, with their piercing gazes and enigmatic smiles, radiated an aura of otherworldly knowledge. Their presence was magnetic, drawing the villagers in with an almost hypnotic pull. They spoke of ancient prophecies, of a coming apocalypse, and of their ability to guide the villagers to salvation. Their words were filled with a sense of urgency and conviction that left the villagers both fearful and hopeful.
They spoke of ancient prophecies, of a coming apocalypse, and of their ability to guide the villagers to salvation. The villagers, who had always relied on their traditions and folklore, found themselves at a crossroads.
Magdalene, with his flowing black hair and piercing green eyes, captivated the men with tales of spiritual enlightenment. His stories were filled with vivid imagery and profound wisdom, leaving the listeners in awe.
The villagers, their lives steeped in superstition and folklore, were drawn to the twins' mystique. They saw in Magdalene and Alizar a chance to connect with something greater than themselves, something that transcended their everyday existence.
Alizar, tall and imposing with a voice that resonated with quiet authority, preached of impending doom. His words were like a spell, binding the villagers to his vision of the future, and the need for unwavering faith. The villagers, caught between fear and fascination, listened intently, their hearts and minds swayed by the twins' powerful presence and compelling message. At first, the twins were welcomed with open arms. They shared their meager provisions, offered shelter, and listened with rapt attention to their pronouncements. The villagers, hungry for something beyond their arduous existence, found solace in the twins' words, yet not everyone was swayed. Old Man Ruiz, the village elder, regarded the newcomers with suspicion. He had seen enough cycles of life and death to distrust those who claimed to hold the keys to salvation. He saw a darkness lurking beneath the twins' charm, a hunger for power disguised as spiritual guidance. His warnings, however, fell on deaf ears. Slowly, subtly, the twins began to weave their web of control.
They introduced strange rituals, chanting hypnotic prayers under the light of the moon.
We spoke of a sacred plant, a gift from the gods, that could grant visions and unlock hidden powers.
This plant, they claimed, held the key to their salvation. What they didn't reveal was that this sacred plant was, in fact, a potent hallucinogen.
Its effects were insidious, warping perception and eroding free will.
Under its influence, the villagers became pliable, their minds susceptible to the twins' manipulations. The rituals grew increasingly bizarre, fueled by the hallucinogenic brew and the twins' pronouncements. Animal sacrifices became commonplace, the once peaceful village now echoing with the terrified cries of dying creatures. The villagers, their minds clouded by the drugs and the constant fear-mongering, were easily swayed. They believed the twins' claims that these sacrifices were necessary to appease the gods and ensure their survival. The line between reality and delusion began to blur, the once vibrant community now shrouded in an unsettling haze of paranoia and fanaticism. As the cult's grip tightened, a chasm formed within the village. Those who remained skeptical of the twins, who clung to their traditional beliefs, found themselves increasingly ostracized. Old man Ruiz, his warnings now ignored, could only watch in despair as his friends and neighbors succumbed to the madness. Families were torn apart, suspicion and paranoia poisoning the once unbreakable bonds of community. Yba Bua, once a sanctuary of peace, had become a breeding ground for fear and division. The twins, drunk on their newfound power, grew bolder. They demanded complete obedience, their pronouncements now carrying the weight of law. Those who dared question their authority were swiftly punished. Beatings became commonplace, dissenters disappearing into the night, their fates unknown. Fear, the twins' most potent weapon, held the village in its grip. The villagers, their minds warped by the drugs and the constant threat of retribution, became little more than puppets, dancing to the tune of the twins' twisted desires. With each passing day, the rituals grew more depraved. The twins, their whispers of salvation now replaced by pronouncements of doom, demanded ever greater sacrifices.
Livestock, once the lifeblood of the village, was slaughtered with impunity. Then, the unthinkable occurred.
A young girl, barely old enough to understand the horrors unfolding around her, vanished without a trace.
Whispers, hushed and fearful, spoke of a blood sacrifice, a ritual offering to appease the wrath of the gods.
The disappearance of the girl proved to be a turning point. The village of Yba Bua, once a serene and peaceful place, was now shrouded in an air of mystery and fear. The villagers who once went about their daily lives with ease, now lived in constant dread, their eyes filled with worry and suspicion. Hector Soles, a young teacher from a neighboring village, had heard rumors of the strange happenings in Yba Bua. The stories were unsettling, filled with whispers of dark forces and unexplained events. Hector, a man of reason and logic, found it hard to believe, but the growing number of disappearances could not be ignored.
Concerned for the safety of his sister, who had recently married a man from the village, he embarked on a perilous journey to uncover the truth. With a heavy heart and a mind filled with questions, Hector packed his belongings and set out, determined to find answers and protect his loved ones. What he found horrified him. The village was not just plagued by disappearances, it was as if a dark cloud had settled over it, draining the life and spirit from its inhabitants. The once vibrant community was now a ghost town, filled with shadows and echoes of the past.
The village, once a beacon of life, was now a shadow of its former self. The streets, once bustling with activity, were now eerily silent, overgrown with weeds and decay. The buildings, once well-kept and lively, stood abandoned and crumbling, a testament to the village's tragic decline. Its inhabitants, their eyes vacant and hollow, moved with the mechanical obedience of the damned. They seemed to be mere shells of their former selves, their spirits broken and their minds lost to some unseen force. The sight was both heartbreaking and terrifying.
Hector, his heart heavy with dread, knew he had to act. He could not stand by and watch as the village and its people succumbed to this mysterious darkness. With a sense of urgency, he clutched the crucifix his mother had given him and vowed to find a way to save them. He contacted the authorities, his desperate pleas for help finally reaching the outside world. He described the horrors he had witnessed, hoping that someone, anyone, would come to their aid. The fate of Yba Bua now rested in the hands of those who would listen and act.
On May 18, 1963, a day that would be etched into the annals of history, a detachment of police officers, led by the hardened captain, arrived in Yba Bua, a remote village nestled in the heart of Mexico. The scene that greeted them was nothing short of apocalyptic. The once vibrant village now lay in ruins, a ghostly shadow of its former self. The ground was littered with animal carcasses, their lifeless forms a grim testament to the horrors that had unfolded. The air was thick with the stench of decay and despair, a suffocating miasma that clung to everything it touched. In the center of the village, surrounded by a ring of chanting, entranced villagers, stood the twins, Magdalena and Alazar Soles. Their eyes, cold and unfeeling, seemed to pierce through the very souls of those who dared to look upon them. The ensuing confrontation was brief and brutal. The police, armed and determined, clashed with the villagers in a desperate bid to restore order. The villagers, their minds addled by the drugs and years of manipulation, put up little resistance. Their once fierce loyalty to the twins now crumbled under the weight of reality. The twins, their reign of terror finally at an end, were apprehended and taken into custody. Their capture marked the end of a dark chapter in the village's history. The villagers, their minds slowly clearing from the fog of delusion, were left to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives. They began the arduous task of rebuilding, both physically and emotionally. The village of Yba Bua, forever scarred by the tragedy, was eventually abandoned, its inhabitants scattered to the winds. Over time, nature reclaimed the land and the village was swallowed by overgrown vegetation. The true story of Yba Bua, stripped of the internet's embellishments and distortions, is a chilling reminder of the human capacity for both good and evil. It serves as a stark warning of the dangers of blind faith and the seductive power of manipulation. It is a tale of blind faith, the seductive power of manipulation, and the devastating consequences of unchecked power. The villagers of Yba Bua, once united in their devotion to the twins, were now left to grapple with the aftermath of their blind obedience. Their story is a haunting testament to the fragility of the human spirit and the enduring strength of hope in the face of unimaginable darkness.